At
Thank you so
2:03
much.
a.m., the CEO followed the poorest man
I
in
don't
her
know what I would
company
have done.
into the frozen city, convinced she was about to expose a criminal. The Hawthorne Tech Tower cut into the Chicago night like a blade. 47 floors of glass, steel, and decisions that never slept. Up there, behind conference room windows designed to impress and intimidate, Amelia Rowan stood perfectly still. Not because she was
Thank you so
calm,
much.
because the kind of fear she carried no longer
I
had
don't
the
know what I would
decency
have
to
done.
tremble. She had been named CEO at 33, the youngest in the company's history. The headline that looked like triumph and felt like a sentence. The board had praised her precision, her discipline, the way she could speak about efficiency as if it were a moral value. Tonight, that same board had left her with a warning disguised as advice. Growth was slowing. Competitors were encroaching. Shareholders were restless. And a certain phrase, quiet, polite, lethal, had been repeated twice in the room. We need to be sure the company is protected. Protected from theft, from scandal, from weakness, from anything that might make the tower look less like a fortress and more like what it truly was, a machine built by humans who could panic. Amelia watched snow drift sideways across the skyline. From this height it looked almost gentle. White ash. Silent confession. On her desk, 3 security reports sat in a neat stack, as if paper could hold a truth still. Her head of security had delivered them with the careful tone people used when speaking to someone who could end careers without raising her voice. Anomalies, small ones, always after midnight, always around the lower floors and service corridors, always involving one name: Darius Cole. Night janitor, contract worker, no college listed, no emergency contact in the system, wages barely above minimum, tenure, 3 years, attendance, perfect, too perfect. Amelia had spent her whole life learning what patterns meant. She read financial statements like weather. She knew that anything consistent was either controlled or hiding something. She did not like mysteries. Mysteries had cost her too much. On the screen in front of her, a live camera feed showed the quiet of the building's lower levels. Empty hallways, closed doors, the occasional flicker of a motion sensor. Then movement. A man stepped into frame, pushing a cleaning cart with the slow, careful economy of someone who understood exhaustion but did not permit it to win. Darius Cole. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the standard Navy uniform that made everyone in his position look interchangeable. But there was nothing interchangeable about his stillness. Even the way he walked suggested he was always calculating. Time, distance, sound. Amelia leaned forward. The timestamp read, 2:03 a.m. Like clockwork, he finished the last visible segment of his route at the exact same minute he always did. No detours, no lingering. He wiped down a final set of elevator buttons with practiced precision, then rolled the cart into the supply corridor and reached beneath the shelf. He pulled out a battered metal toolbox. Old, dented. The kind of thing a person kept when replacing it would feel like betrayal. He latched it shut, lifted it with one hand, and left the frame. Amelia's jaw tightened. Toolbox. Not company issued. Not in his inventory log. Her mind began writing its own story, because minds always did when they were afraid. She saw drugs being moved through service hallways, flash drives, stolen prototypes. She saw headlines. Hawthorne Tech security breach. She saw the board's faces, controlled, disappointed, already searching for the next CEO. Amelia Rowan had not climbed this far to be replaced by a rumor. She picked up her phone and hovered her thumb over the security chief's number. One call, and a guard team would stop him at the lobby doors. One call, and she could watch from above while someone else did the messy part. But then she remembered something her father once told her, back when she still believed loyalty was a human thing, not a corporate slogan. If you need to know the truth, don't send a messenger. Messengers bring you what they think you can handle. Amelia lowered the phone. A colder thought rose in her chest. What if someone inside security was already compromised? That was how it always went in stories. The rot was never visible from the outside. She stood, slipped on her long black coat, and turned off the lights in her office. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. The quiet in the mirrored walls made her reflection look like a stranger, a woman with gold hair pinned back too tightly, with eyes that had learned to sharpen themselves into weapons. When the doors opened into the lobby, the building was half asleep. The night guard at the front desk glanced up, surprised to see her. "Ms. Rowan, everything okay?" "Just couldn't sleep," Amelia said, her voice smooth with rehearsed normalcy. "Don't worry, I'm fine." He nodded, already relieved by the permission to stop thinking. Amelia walked past him and out through the revolving doors. The cold hit her like a slap. Chicago winter did not flirt. It did not negotiate. It entered your lungs and made you understand, immediately, what smallness was. Across the street, she spotted Darius in the weak glow of a street lamp. He moved with the same measured pace, toolbox swinging lightly at his side, shoulders slightly hunched against the wind. He did not look like someone afraid of being followed. That made her more certain she was right. Amelia stayed back, keeping to shadows between parked cars and bare trees. Her heels clicked too loudly on the frozen sidewalk, so she slowed, matched her steps to the traffic's distant noise. A red light blinked on an intersection camera overhead, recording everything with indifferent patience. She felt, briefly, the irony of being the one watched. Darius turned down a side street toward the industrial district. The buildings here were lower, older, darker, brick and rust, and the ghosts of factories that had shut down decades ago. Amelia's breath fogged the air. Her fingers went numb inside her gloves. She kept walking, and as the distance between the tower and the street behind her widened, something inside Amelia began to shift, not soften, but sharpen in a different direction. Because she realized she was not just chasing an employee, she was chasing a narrative. If she was right, she would prove she deserved the chair. She would prove she could protect the company. She would quiet the board's hunger for blood. And if she was wrong, no. She did not allow that thought to finish. Ahead, Darius paused under a flickering streetlight, looked briefly at the empty road, then continued. Amelia's heart thudded once, hard. She thought she was hunting a threat. She didn't know she was walking toward a truth. And that truth was already waiting for her, like a door that had been unlocked for far too long. The city had the look of something holding its breath. Snow moved through the air in thin diagonal sheets, driven by a wind that never asked permission. Traffic lights blinked red over empty intersections, as if rehearsing rules for an audience that had gone home. Even the storefront signs seemed dimmer at this hour, half-lit letters and tired neon, the kind of glow that made the world feel unfinished. Amelia Rowan kept her distance, not because she was afraid of the man ahead of her, Darius Cole, the night janitor with the battered toolbox, but because she was afraid of being wrong in the one way that mattered. Wrong meant the board was right to doubt her. Wrong meant she had mistaken decay for danger and weakness for criminality. So she built her certainty brick by brick, the way people always did when they couldn't bear the alternative. Darius walked with the same unbroken discipline he had in the building. Steady pace, shoulders slightly forward into the cold, toolbox swinging with easy familiarity. He did not once glance behind him. That, to Amelia, felt like confirmation. People who had nothing to hide looked around. They checked their phones. They hesitated at corners. They moved like they belonged to their own lives. Darius moved like a man following instructions only he could hear. He crossed into the industrial district where Hawthorne Tech's polished glass gave way to older bones. Brick warehouses, chain-link fences, loading docks that hadn't seen a legitimate shipment in years. Here, the city's wealth stopped pretending it was evenly distributed. Amelia's boot slipped once on a patch of ice. She caught herself on a frozen parking meter, her palm stinging through leather. She swallowed a curse and forced her breathing to slow. The cold was not just temperature. It was pressure, something that pressed into her chest, into her ribs, into the small spaces where pride lived. She was not dressed for this. Her coat was designer. Her scarf was cashmere. Everything about her had been chosen to signal authority, not survival. For the first time that night, the thought came uninvited. If something happens out here, no title will save you. No glass walls. No assistance. No narrative you can control. She hated how human that felt. Darius turned down a narrower street, lit only by a row of dying lamps. A freight track ran parallel, the metal rails half buried under snow like old scars. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn moaned low and long, an animal sound, lonely enough to make the night feel personal. Amelia paused behind a parked delivery van, peering around the corner. Darius was still moving, but now the rhythm of his steps had changed slightly. Not faster, not slower, more deliberate, as if he were approaching a place that required attention, a deal, a handoff, a secret. Her mind supplied images it had collected from every scandal she had ever read in the business pages. Stolen hardware smuggled out in toolboxes, bribes in unmarked envelopes, employees feeding competitors information one night at a time. The story inside her head became so vivid she almost heard it. And yet, the city itself disagreed. Because there was nothing theatrical here. No other footsteps. No waiting car with its engine idling. No sudden movement in the shadows. Just one man, one toolbox, and the sound of wind scraping its nails across metal. Amelia followed, pushing herself onward through numbness, through the sting in her lungs. The farther they went, the more the streets emptied, until it felt as if the two of them were walking through the remains of a world that had already ended. At the edge of the district, Darius crossed a wide road and headed toward a cluster of abandoned structures near an old commuter rail station. The station's sign hung crooked, letters missing, the platform lights dead. The whole place had the dull, forgotten look of something the city had decided it could live without. And there, at the far end of the platform, beyond a fence bent open like a mouth, stood a building that should have been condemned years ago. A warehouse. Its windows were mostly boarded. Its brick skin was blackened by age and weather. The loading door was half collapsed, and the snow had formed drifts against its base as if trying to bury it. Amelia's heartbeat became loud enough to feel like betrayal. This is it, she thought. The moment where truth reveals itself. She pulled out her phone, not to call security. She had made that decision already, but to switch on the camera. If she was right, she would have evidence. If she was wrong, she would have proof of her own foolishness, and she could delete it later. Her thumb hovered. Then she froze. Because Darius, in front of the warehouse, did not go to the loading door. He went to a smaller side entrance that looked like it hadn't been used in years. He set his toolbox down carefully, as if it contained something fragile, and reached into his jacket. Keys. That small detail struck Amelia harder than it should have. Keys meant permission. Keys meant routine. Keys meant this wasn't a one-time crime. It was something repeated, maintained, kept alive. He unlocked the door, and for a second, nothing happened. The warehouse remained dark and dead, a lump of shadow against the white snow. Then the door opened wider, and light spilled out. Not harsh fluorescent light, not the cold glare of industrial security. Warm light, yellow, gentle, domestic, the kind of light that belonged to kitchens, not warehouses. The kind of light that made faces look softer. The kind of light that told a human body without words. You are safe here. Amelia's throat tightened. She hated the irrational relief that rose in her, and she hated the suspicion that followed it. Because warmth could be staged. Because criminals could build cozy hiding places too. Darius stepped inside, lifted the toolbox, and closed the door behind him, sealing the light away. Amelia stood in the snow, staring at the building as if it had spoken. Her mind scrambled to adjust the narrative it had been so proud of. If this was a drug den, why the warm light? If this was a theft ring, why the silence? If this was something illegal, why did it feel, strangely, like a home? A gust of wind whipped past her, throwing snow into her face. She blinked hard, wiping it away with the back of her glove. Her cheeks burned from the cold, but her palms were sweating. She could still leave. She could turn back, go to the tower, pretend she had never stepped into the city's underbelly for the sake of a theory. But the light had done something to her. Not softened her. No. It had provoked her. It had challenged the version of the world she depended on. Because if the poorest man in her company carried warmth into the place she expected to find rot, then perhaps she didn't understand poverty at all. Perhaps she didn't understand power. Amelia approached the warehouse slowly, every step cautious. Her boots sank into snow that hadn't been disturbed except for Darius's footprints. The air smelled faintly of old metal and something else. Wood smoke, maybe, or overheated wiring. She reached the fence, noticing how it had been cut and bent open not recently, but carefully, as if someone had needed a passage and then tried to make it look like decay. She moved through the gap, her coat brushing the cold wire. At the side door, she stopped. She listened first. One full breath, then another. Nothing. No voices. No music. Only a faint hum like a machine running in the distance. A heater. Or something pretending to be one. She set her gloved hand on the handle and left the door just slightly unlatched. An exit that remained an exit. A part of her, the executive, the strategist, whispered a warning. If this goes wrong, there will be no boardroom to protect you. No glass walls, no assistance, no narrative you can control. Another part of her, the one she had trained to ignore, answered quietly, "If you walk away now, you will never know what kind of person you've become." Amelia inhaled, felt the cold bite deeper, and turned the handle. The door opened, and the warmth that poured out was so sudden, so real, it made her eyes sting, as if her body had forgotten, for a moment, that comfort existed. Warmth spilled where fear was supposed to live, and Amelia Rowan stepped forward into a world she had never learned to see. The warmth hit Amelia Rowan first, not gently, but all at once, like a memory she hadn't prepared herself to carry. It wrapped around her ankles, her knees, climbed up beneath her coat, and loosened something rigid in her chest. Her breath caught, not from the cold this time, but from the shock of contrast. Outside, the city had been all edges and indifference. Inside, the air hummed with a low, steady heat that felt improvised yet deliberate, earned. She stood just inside the doorway, the door still a fraction ajar behind her, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. The light came from a row of mismatched lamps, a desk lamp with a cracked shade, a floor lamp missing its pull chain, a string of warm bulbs stapled along a beam like someone had learned electricity by necessity. This was not a warehouse. This was a room someone had insisted into existence. Against the far wall, 7 small mattresses lay side by side, close enough that the blankets touched. The blankets did not match. Some floral, some cartoon bright, some threadbare, but each was pulled up with careful precision, corners tucked in the way a tired adult tucks them when time is short and sleep matters. 7 children. They were asleep. Not the restless sleep of fear, but the deep, heavy stillness of bodies that had been allowed, at least for this night, to stop guarding themselves. One child had kicked a leg free, socked foot hanging over the edge of the mattress. Another clutched a stuffed bear so worn its fur had thinned to felt. Amelia's mind stalled. This did not fit. Her first instinct, the one she trusted most, was to count exits, identify risks, catalog violations, fire hazards, zoning laws, liability nightmares. Everything she had been trained to see rose up, eager and sharp. But beneath that, something slower and more dangerous began to move, because the children were not hidden. They were centered. Near them, against a makeshift work table built from old pallets, sat a laptop so scratched its logo was barely visible. Its screen glowed faintly with a paused document, columns of numbers, notes written in neat, disciplined lines. Beside it lay a stack of school books, spines creased, pages marked with colored tabs. Math, science, reading. A schedule was taped to the wall. Wake times, school drop-offs, homework hours, dinner, lights out, structure. Amelia swallowed. She had expected chaos. She had expected desperation masquerading as order. Instead, she found something that felt uncomfortably intentional. A sound came from the corner of the room. Metal against metal. A low clink, followed by a soft curse. Not angry, just tired. Darius Cole knelt beside a squat, humming machine that had once been a space heater. Its casing was open, wires exposed, the insides held together by a careful combination of solder, zip ties, and ingenuity. He worked with his sleeves rolled up, hands steady, expression focused. He did not see her yet. He reached into his toolbox, pulled out a screwdriver that looked older than some of the children behind him, and adjusted a connection. The hum smoothed, dropped into a more even rhythm. Satisfied, he leaned back slightly. That was when one of the children stirred. A small girl, maybe 6 or 7, rolled onto her side, hair spilling over her face. She blinked sleepily toward the light, then smiled, slow and unguarded, when she saw him. "Uncle D?" she whispered, voice thick with sleep. Darius turned instantly. "Hey," he murmured, just as softly. "Go back to sleep. Heater's fixed." The girl nodded, already fading, her trust so complete it made Amelia's throat tighten unexpectedly. She turned her face into the pillow and slept again, as if the world had earned her confidence. Uncle. Not Dad. Not Sir. Not Mister. Family without the paperwork. Darius stood and finally noticed Amelia. The moment stretched. Neither of them spoke. The room seemed to hold its breath, the heater's gentle hum the only sound daring to exist between them. Amelia saw, in that instant, calculation flicker across his face. Not fear, not guilt, but assessment. Distance to the door, her posture, her coat, her shoes. He recognized authority the way people learn to recognize storms. "This place isn't for people like you," he said quietly. "Not accusatory, not defensive, just factual." "I followed you," Amelia replied, the words feeling clumsy as soon as they left her mouth. "I thought—" She stopped herself. Thought what? That a janitor couldn't possibly be doing something human without breaking a law. Darius's eyes flicked briefly to the children, then back to her. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in resolve. "Keep your voice down," he said. "They need sleep." The reprimand was gentle, and it landed harder than if he had raised his voice. Amelia nodded before she could stop herself. "I didn't call security," she said, unsure why she felt the need to prove that. "I didn't tell anyone." "Not yet," Darius replied. There it was, the line between them, the quiet acknowledgement that power always traveled in groups. She took a step further inside, leaving the door exactly as it was, still slightly open. "This place, she said, gesturing vaguely. "It's not what I expected." "No," he agreed. "It rarely is." She looked at the heater again, at the exposed wiring. "That's dangerous," she said automatically. "It could fail. Overheat." "It won't," he said. "I've been monitoring it. Redundant cutoff here. Manual override here. It's safer than most of the units in your building." Your building. The words were not sharp, but they were precise. Amelia felt something shift under her ribs. Small, uncomfortable awareness. "You're an engineer," she said, the realization arriving fully formed. Darius hesitated, just long enough to confirm it. "I was," he said. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Outside, the wind battered the warehouse walls, as if reminding them all how thin the barrier really was between warmth and ruin. Amelia looked at the children once more, at the way their blankets rose and fell, at the careful spacing between their beds, designed so no one would feel alone but everyone could still breathe. "How long?" she asked. Darius followed her gaze. "Long enough," he said. She nodded, though she didn't know what she was agreeing to. The room, the impossible room, pressed in on her senses. Every detail contradicted the story she had brought with her. Every breath she took made it harder to hold on to the certainty that had justified her pursuit. She realized then what unsettled her most. This place didn't exist because of charity. It existed because someone had decided that invisibility could be used for protection. And she had been standing on the other side of that invisibility her entire career. Darius stepped past her, reached for a flashlight mounted near the door, and flicked it on, not toward the children, but directly toward her face. The beam was steady, unflinching. "Who are you?" he asked. Amelia raised a hand to shield her eyes, the light cutting through her composure more effectively than any accusation ever had. For the first time that night, she felt truly exposed. Because being seen, she realized, was worse than being accused. And somewhere in that realization, the night quietly shifted, preparing them both for a truth that would not ask permission to surface. The flashlight stayed on Amelia's face for a beat longer than necessary. Not as a threat, as a boundary. Darius lowered it only after he was certain she would not move closer to the mattresses. He set it back on its hook and crossed his arms, not defensively, but like a man bracing himself against weather he could already feel changing. "Say it," he said. Amelia blinked, her eyes still adjusting to the softer light. "Say what?" "Who you are," Darius replied, "and why someone dressed like you follows a janitor into a place like this at 2 a.m. There was no anger in his voice, no plea, just the calm expectation that lies would waste time neither of them could afford. Amelia inhaled. The air tasted faintly of warm dust and old wood. She had stood in courtrooms, boardrooms, crisis meetings, where billions of dollars trembled on the edge of sentences. But none of those rooms had required this particular kind of honesty. "I'm Amelia Rowan," she said, "CEO of Hawthorne Tech." The title landed quietly. Too quietly. Darius did not react. No widening eyes, no sudden stiffness. He only nodded once, as if confirming a detail he had already suspected. "That explains the shoes," he said. The comment was not meant to wound. It did anyway. Amelia swallowed. "I followed you because there were irregularities," she said, defaulting briefly to the language that had always protected her. "Security reports, gaps, equipment not logged. I thought that I was stealing," Darius finished for her. "Or worse." "Yes," she said. Then, because something in this room refused to let her hide behind efficiency, she added, "I thought you were a criminal." The word felt heavier spoken aloud. It did not belong here among sleeping children and improvised warmth. Darius nodded again. "Most people do," he said, "sooner or later." He walked to the work table and began packing away his tools with methodical care. Each one returned to its place as if order itself were a kind of prayer. "I don't need your sympathy," he continued, "and I don't need your permission. But I need you to understand something very clearly." He looked at her then, really looked. "This place exists because the world you run doesn't." Amelia's chest tightened. "That's not fair," she said reflexively. "Fair doesn't enter into it," Darius replied. "Systems do." He gestured around the room. These kids fell through the cracks. Foster placements that didn't last. Parents who disappeared. Paperwork that moved slower than hunger. Shelters that closed at night. Schools that couldn't keep them safe after dark. Amelia followed his gaze as he spoke. The girl with the stuffed bear shifted in her sleep, murmured something unintelligible, then settled again. "How did you find them?" Amelia asked quietly. "They found me," Darius said. "One at a time. Word travels faster than policy." He closed the toolbox and sat on the edge of a crate, elbows resting on his knees. "I was an engineer once," he said, not looking at her. "Systems design, infrastructure, redundancy planning. I believed very deeply that if you built things well enough, people wouldn't suffer." Amelia felt the weight in his words before he reached the end of the sentence. "I was wrong." The heater hummed steadily beside them, its sound suddenly fragile. "My wife died in an accident," Darius continued. "A failure upstream that no one wanted to take responsibility for. The report said unavoidable. The lawsuit said insufficient evidence. The company said, our thoughts are with you." He exhaled slowly. "My daughter didn't survive the winter after that." Amelia's breath caught. He did not pause for her reaction. He did not need it. "I tried to stay in the field," he said. "Tried to fix things from inside. But every solution required permission. Every improvement threatened someone's metrics. Eventually, I understood that visibility was the enemy." He looked at her again, eyes clear. "So I chose a job where no one asked questions, where I could move at night, where I could earn cash fast, where I could be invisible." Amelia's voice came out rougher than she intended. "You could have come to us, to the company. We have programs, grants, foundations." Darius smiled then, but it was not kind. "You don't look for people like me," he said. "You look for stories that fit." The words struck with surgical precision. "You were looking for a criminal," he went on. "You never looked for a human." Amelia felt the truth of that sentence land somewhere beneath her training, beneath her titles. "I didn't know," she said, and immediately hated how small it sounded. "No," Darius agreed. "You didn't." A long silence followed, the kind that forced reflection rather than offering relief. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the boarded windows. One of the children stirred again, coughing lightly in her sleep. Darius stood instantly, crossed the room, and checked her breathing with practiced ease. He adjusted the blanket, lowered the heater's output by a fraction. Crisis managed. Quiet restored. Amelia watched, something in her expression finally breaking, not into tears, but into recognition. "I won't tell anyone," she said, "about this place, about them." Darius turned back to her. "I know." "You don't know that," Amelia replied. "You don't know me." "I know systems," he said, "and I know when someone's already lost." She stiffened. "Lost what?" "Certainty," Darius answered, "the kind that keeps you warm." The words stayed with her. "I can help," Amelia said. "Not tonight, not with promises, but I can—" "No," Darius interrupted gently. "Not yet." He met her gaze, steady and unafraid. "Help that arrives too quickly is rarely clean, and it always comes with expectations." Amelia nodded slowly. He was right. She hated that he was right. She turned toward the door, her movements careful, deliberate, as if leaving required the same respect as entering. At the threshold, she paused. "Thank you," she said, unsure what exactly she was thanking him for. Darius did not answer. She stepped out into the cold. The door remained barely ajar behind her for a second, then eased shut, sealing the warmth inside. The warehouse returned to silence. The city resumed its frozen indifference. Amelia stood there for a moment longer than necessary, her breath fogging the night, her mind refusing to sleep. The building behind her slept. Her conscience did not. And as she walked back toward the distant glow of Hawthorne Tech Tower, she did not yet know that morning would arrive not with clarity, but with collapse. Morning arrived without mercy. Chicago woke beneath a pale, brittle sky, the kind that looked clean but felt hostile. Snow had hardened overnight into a skin of ice that reflected light without warmth, turning sidewalks into mirrors and breath into evidence. By 8:12 a.m., Hawthorne Tech Tower was full of people, full of coffee, full of the small, rehearsed optimism that came with employment and heat. At 8:17 a.m., the heat went out. It did not fail dramatically. There was no explosion, no alarm, just a subtle thinning of air, a quiet withdrawal that most people did not notice until their fingers began to ache and their shoulders instinctively hunched. By 8:24 a.m., complaints started to ripple through the lower floors. By 8:31 a.m., the internal messaging system lagged, stalled, then dropped entirely. By 8:38 a.m., the servers followed. Amelia Rowan stood in the executive elevator, watching the floor numbers climb, when the car jerked slightly and slowed. The lights flickered, once, twice, before stabilizing. Her phone buzzed in her hand like a living thing. Facilities. HVAC failure reported. IT. Network instability. Unknown source. Security. Multiple access errors in system logs. Board liaison. Emergency session requested. Immediate. Amelia closed her eyes for a brief, disciplined second. The warehouse. The heater. The quiet competence with which Darius Cole had stabilized a failing system using parts no one else wanted. She opened her eyes. "Of course," she murmured. The elevator doors slid open onto the executive floor, releasing her into controlled chaos. Assistants moved too quickly, their efficiency fraying at the edges. Someone argued into a headset near the glass wall. Another stood staring at a tablet that refused to refresh. The building, the machine she had been entrusted to command, was cold, literally and figuratively. "Temperatures dropping fast," her chief of operations said as Amelia approached the war room. "Lower floors first. We've rerouted power twice, but the system's behaving like it doesn't recognize itself." "That's impossible," the head of engineering snapped. "Our redundancies are failing," the COO finished, quietly. Amelia took her seat at the head of the table, the leather cold beneath her palms. "Cause?" she asked. Silence. Not ignorance. Fear. "We're still investigating," engineering said. "Logs are incomplete." Amelia's gaze sharpened. "Incomplete how?" "Gaps," he admitted. "Time stamps missing. Subsystems looping. It's like someone—" He stopped himself. Like someone knew where to touch it. Amelia finished silently. Around the table, breath fogged faintly as the temperature continued its slow, humiliating descent. Jackets appeared. Scarves. One board member kept rubbing his hands together as if friction could replace infrastructure. "This cannot become public," another said. "If word gets out that our systems are this fragile—" "They aren't fragile," the head of engineering insisted, his voice rising with desperation. They're being interfered with. The word hung in the air. Interfered with. Amelia felt the room's gravity shift subtly toward her. This was her domain, her responsibility, her failure, if it came to that. Find the source, Bufomos, she said calmly. Now. We need time, someone replied. You don't have it, Amelia said. The building is bleeding trust. Her phone buzzed again. Facilities, space heaters being deployed. Insufficient. HR. Multiple departments requesting early dismissal. PR. Media inquiries pending. Rumors on social already. The board liaison leaned forward. We need a name, Amelia. If this is sabotage, we need to show decisive action. A scapegoat. The word did not need to be spoken. It lived comfortably in corporate air. Amelia's mind returned, unbidden, to Darius's words. Systems do. She stood. I know someone who can fix this. Laughter answered her. Not cruel, nervous, disbelieving. Now is not the time for jokes, one board member said. I'm not joking, Amelia replied. The head of engineering frowned. With respect, Amelia, this isn't a situation for outside consultants. This is a system-level failure, Amelia finished, which requires someone who understands systems from the inside out. And who is this miracle worker? The COO asked. Amelia hesitated for exactly one breath. A janitor, she said. The room stilled. Then the laughter returned, sharper this time, edged with relief that this at least could be dismissed. You're serious? Someone asked. I've never been more serious, Amelia said. This is absurd, engineering snapped. We have PhDs on payroll, people who built this architecture. And yet, Amelia said, her voice level, the temperature keeps falling. As if on cue, the lights dimmed again. A projector shut off mid-slide. Someone cursed. Silence reclaimed the table. Bring him, the board liaison said finally, his tone thin. If only to prove a point. Amelia nodded once. She did not allow herself to smile. She left the room, coat already in hand. The trip down felt longer than the night before. The building groaned in unfamiliar ways, vents ticking as metal contracted. Employees huddled in break rooms, clutching paper cups, watching her pass with eyes that held questions she could not yet answer. Outside, the cold bit harder. She spotted Darius Cole near the service entrance, exactly where he always was at this hour, sweeping a patch of floor no one would notice if it stayed dirty. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something guarded. If you're down here, he said, something's broken. Yes, Amelia replied, badly. Yes. He set the broom aside. People are going to look for someone to blame, he said. Yes. Darius exhaled slowly. And you came to me. I came because you can fix it, Amelia said. Then quieter. And because I don't want the wrong person punished. He searched her face not for sincerity but for durability. Once I step inside that room, he said, there's no going back to invisible. Amelia met his gaze. I know. Another pause. Then Darius picked up his battered toolbox. Let's see what they've been ignoring, he said. As they walked back toward the building together, employees watched in confusion, the CEO and the janitor side by side, moving into the cold heart of a system that had pretended it could run without remembering who kept it alive. And somewhere above them, In a room full of titles and fear, the temperature kept falling, waiting to see who would break first. They did not stop staring when Darius Cole stepped into the war room. They tried, some of them, but habit betrayed them. Eyes lingered on his jacket, still marked with salt from the snow. On his boots, practical and worn. On the battered metal toolbox in his right hand, the kind of object that announced maintenance, not authority. The room itself seemed to recoil. This was a place designed to flatten uncertainty. Glass walls, polished table, screens lining the perimeter like witnesses prepared to testify. Every chair had a name attached to it. Every name a resume thick with credentials. This was where problems were framed as abstractions and solved by consensus. Darius did not belong to the abstraction. He felt it immediately. The temperature had dropped another degree. It was subtle, but he noticed. Noticed the way the air thinned, the way the vents whispered instead of breathed. Machines, he had learned long ago, spoke before they failed. People rarely listened. Amelia Rowan took her seat at the head of the table without ceremony. She did not introduce him. She let the room do what it needed to do first. So, the head of engineering said finally, folding his arms, "This is him." Darius set the toolbox down beside his chair. The sound, metal on glass floor, was louder than it should have been. "Yes," Amelia said, "this is him." A few smiles flickered and died. Someone coughed. Someone else glanced toward the ceiling vents as if hoping for divine intervention in the form of restored heat. "With respect," engineering continued, "we're dealing with a multi-layer systems failure, HVAC, server load balancing, internal network routing. This isn't," he gestured vaguely, "a maintenance issue." Darius looked at him for the first time, not challengingly, not defensively, curiously. "When did it start?" he asked. The engineer hesitated, thrown off by the lack of deference. "Around 8:15? Lower floors first?" Darius asked. "Yes." "Did you reroute power before or after the first network stall?" A pause. "After." Darius nodded once. "That was your first mistake." A ripple moved through the room, not outrage, not yet, but something close to disbelief. "You're saying," the COO began. "I'm saying," Darius interrupted gently, "that your systems are doing exactly what you taught them to do." He stood and walked to the nearest screen without asking permission. Amelia watched closely, but did not stop him. He did not touch the controls. He listened, literally leaned in, head tilted, eyes half-lidded, as if the faint hum behind the wall were a voice he recognized. "Your HVAC redundancy loops through the same logic gate as your internal routing failsafe," he said. "It saves money. It looks efficient on paper. But when temperature drops too fast, the system prioritizes data integrity over human comfort." "That's not," engineering began. "You tested it in simulated environments," Darius continued. "Not in real winter. Not with aging infrastructure. Not with 3 years of deferred maintenance masked as optimization." The room went still. Amelia felt the shift. The precise moment skepticism began to thin. "How do you know this?" someone asked. Darius turned back to the table. "Because I've been listening to it every night." He knelt and opened his toolbox. Inside were not just tools, but notebooks. Pages yellowed, corners folded, filled with diagrams drawn in tight, disciplined lines. Not corporate schematics. Practical ones. Maps of a system as it behaved, not as it was sold. You ignore warning signs because they don't trigger alerts, he said, laying one page flat. But metal expands before software fails. Fans change pitch. Vibration shifts. He reached up and placed his palm against the wall near a vent. It's been asking for help for months. No one laughed this time. What do you need? Amelia asked. Darius met her eyes. 10 minutes. No interruptions. The head of engineering bristled. Absolutely not. You can't just... 10 minutes, Amelia repeated, her voice calm and immovable. She stood. Others followed instinctively, as if posture alone could restore order. Darius moved with purpose now. He bypassed the central console and headed for an access panel behind the wall, one that had been painted over twice to match the room's aesthetic. He pried it open, exposing cables that had not seen daylight in years. Who authorized this layout? He asked, not expecting an answer. No one spoke. He adjusted one connection, then another. Rerouted a bypass manually, disabled a loop that had no business existing anymore. The room held its breath. Then, quietly, the vents sighed. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. A moment later, one of the screens flickered back to life. Then another. The hum beneath the floor evened out, deepened, steadied. Heat began to move. Someone checked their phone. Network latency just dropped. Server load stabilizing, another said. The room did not erupt. There was no applause, just a collective stillness. The kind that followed a truth too obvious, too late. Darius closed the panel and wiped his hands on a cloth from his pocket. It'll hold, he said. For now. But you've been ignoring this for years. He picked up his toolbox. What broke in minutes, he added, had been asking for attention for a very long time. Silence pressed down harder than the cold ever had. Amelia looked around the table. Faces that had been confident an hour ago now seemed older, thinner. Thank you, she said. Darius nodded once. I'll go. No, Amelia replied. You'll stay. Eyes turned to her. There are questions coming, she continued. And when they do, I don't intend to let the truth stand alone. Darius studied her, measuring, recalibrating. Before he could answer, the head of engineering straightened, something sharp returning to his gaze. This isn't over, he said quietly. Darius met his eyes. It never is. And as the warmth returned fully to the room, creeping into walls, fingers, bones, another kind of chill settled in its place. Because power, once challenged, rarely retreated without setting a trap. And somewhere in the building's restored hum, the first threads of an ambush were already being woven. The warmth returned too easily. That was the first thing Amelia Rowan noticed once the crisis room emptied. How quickly people relaxed, how fast certainty rushed back to fill the space fear had briefly occupied. Jackets came off, coffee reappeared. Jokes followed, thin and premature. Systems stabilized, metrics normalized. Screens glowed green again. Relief in corporate culture was always dangerous. Darius Cole stood near the wall, toolbox at his feet, presence already fading into the background, where people were most comfortable keeping him. He had done what he came to do. He said nothing more. Did not explain further, did not claim credit. Invisibility, Amelia realized, was still his instinct. She had just opened her mouth to ask him to stay when the door reopened. The head of engineering, Elliot Graves, entered with purpose sharpened into something colder. His tablet was tucked under his arm like evidence. Two members of security followed behind him, expressions carefully neutral. Amelia felt it before a word was spoken. The room had changed temperature again, but not in the way thermostats could measure. "Before we adjourn," Graves said, voice even, "there's an issue the board needs to see." Amelia remained standing. "If this is about process review, it can wait." "It can't," he replied. He tapped the tablet, and the central screen lit up. Footage appeared. Grainy, cropped, familiar. Security camera angles from the building's lower levels. Service corridors. Server access points. Timestamps circled in red. And there, moving through the frame, was Darius. Carrying his toolbox. Opening panels. Touching systems. Silence fell. Not confusion, recognition. The kind that came when a narrative suddenly presented itself fully formed, requiring no imagination at all. "This footage," Graves continued, "was pulled from internal archives this morning. It shows unauthorized access to critical infrastructure by a non-engineering employee." He turned slightly toward the board members who had re-entered the room, drawn back by urgency. "An employee," he added, "who was present during this morning's failure, and who conveniently appeared afterward as its solution." Amelia's jaw tightened. "This is selective," she said. "You're showing context without what?" Graves interrupted. "Credentials, authorization, a background check." He looked at Darius for the first time, really looked at him. "No offense," he said, and meant none of it. "But you don't belong anywhere near those systems." Darius did not move. He had seen this before. The shape of it. The way truth was slowly starved until it could no longer defend itself. Security shifted subtly closer. One board member leaned forward. "Are you suggesting sabotage?" "I'm suggesting risk," Graves replied smoothly. "And negligence, and a serious lapse in internal controls." Amelia felt the pull, the familiar gravitational force of institutional self-preservation. This was the moment companies survived by sacrificing something smaller than themselves. A man without a title. A man without allies. A man already invisible enough to disappear cleanly. She turned to Darius. "Did you alter any systems before this morning?" He met her gaze. "I monitored them," he said. "I stabilized minor issues. I reported nothing because there was nowhere to report it." Graves scoffed. "So you admit unauthorized access?" "I admit responsibility," Darius said calmly, "for preventing failure, not causing it." The board exchanged glances. "Ms. Rowan," one of them said, voice tight with urgency, "you brought him in. Are you aware of his activities?" Amelia felt the question narrow into something sharper. "Are you protecting him?" She straightened. "I'm aware that the system failed on our watch," she said, "and that he fixed it." "That's not the question," Graves pressed. "The question is whether you're willing to overlook serious breaches because the optics happen to work in his favor." The room waited. This was the ambush. Amelia recognized it now in full. The footage edited to imply cause, not sequence. The framing tight enough to remove motive, wide enough to plant doubt. A trap built not to prove guilt, but to make defense look irresponsible. She thought of the warehouse, of the children sleeping beneath blankets pulled too thin, of a man who had learned to keep heat alive without permission. She looked back at the screen. "Pause it," she said. Graves hesitated, then complied. The image froze on Darius's silhouette, one hand inside an access panel. "This footage," Amelia said slowly, "shows action, not intent." "Intent is irrelevant when policy," Graves began. "Intent is everything," Amelia cut in. "And context is non-negotiable." She turned to security. "Where are the original logs?" Graves stiffened. "We've reviewed—" "I didn't ask what you reviewed," Amelia said. "I asked where they are." A silence, thin and telling. "The raw logs are archived," Graves said. "We extracted what was necessary." Amelia nodded once. Then she said the sentence that shifted the room. "Open the original logs." Graves stared at her. "That isn't necessary." "It is," Amelia replied. "Now." The board murmured. "You're aware," one member said cautiously, "that this could expose internal failures." "Yes," Amelia said. "That's the point." Graves's jaw tightened. "If you insist on defending him—" "I'm not defending him," Amelia said. "I'm defending the truth." She turned to Darius. "You don't need to say anything." He inclined his head slightly. "Not gratitude. Recognition." Truth did not shout. It waited. Graves signaled reluctantly to it. Fingers moved. Systems accessed deeper layers rarely visited, except when stories began to fray. The screen changed. Raw data scrolled. Dense, unformatted, merciless. Timestamps extended backward. Access IDs populated in long, unbroken chains. Amelia leaned forward. "There," she said. She pointed to a sequence. "See that loop?" she asked the room. "That's not his ID." Graves stepped closer despite himself. The board followed. "What is that?" someone asked. "A ghost process," Amelia said. "One designed to look like system noise." Graves swallowed. "Run the correlation," Amelia ordered. It complied. Names surfaced. Emails. Permissions that should not exist. A pattern emerged, slowly, undeniably. The sabotage was real. But it had not come from the shadows. It had come from the top. Graves stepped back, color draining from his face. "This is—" he began. Amelia raised a hand. "Enough." She looked at Darius. "You were never the threat," she said quietly. Then she turned back to the room. "And this," she continued, "is why truth doesn't shout." She let the silence stretch, heavy and instructive. "It waits," she finished. And as the room absorbed the weight of what had just surfaced, one thing became clear to everyone present. The ambush had failed. But the war had only just revealed its rules. The raw logs did not care who was watching. They spilled across the screens in dense, unflinching columns, timestamps without commentary, access paths without justification, permissions granted and revoked with mechanical indifference. This was data in its purest form, stripped of narrative, immune to tone, unedited. The room leaned forward as one body. "What am I looking at?" a board member asked quietly. Amelia did not answer immediately. She watched Elliot Graves instead, the way his shoulders stiffened, the way his eyes tracked too quickly across the screen, already searching for exits. "You're looking at the difference, Oma-san," she said at last, "between intervention and manipulation." She pointed again. That access ID. It appears repeatedly during the first thermal drop, not during recovery, before. It zoomed in. The name attached to the ID surfaced slowly, like something dragged from deep water. E. Graves. Systems Architecture Override. No one spoke. The heater hummed softly, steady now, as if mocking the silence. Graves laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. That's impossible. My credentials are used across multiple automated processes. Anyone could mirror them? Amelia finished. Yes, if they designed the architecture. She turned to the board. This override isn't reactive. It's proactive. It rerouted load away from stable nodes, forced cascading failures, then masked itself as system noise. One of the directors exhaled sharply. Why would anyone do that? Amelia did not look away from Graves. Because a visible failure justifies an invisible fix. Graves's voice sharpened. This is speculation. No, Darius said calmly. It was the first time he had spoken since the logs appeared. Every eye turned toward him. He stepped forward, not into the center of the room, but just enough to be heard without asking permission. The loop you built, he continued, was elegant, too elegant. It failed in ways that looked accidental until you listened closely. Graves snapped. You have no standing here. Darius met his gaze. I have consequence. He pointed to the screen. That ghost process doesn't just trigger failure. It creates a vacuum, one that only a specific skill set can fill. One you happen to control. A slow, terrible understanding spread through the room. Manufactured crisis, heroic intervention, consolidated power. One board member whispered, "You staged it." Graves's mouth opened, then closed again. I optimized risk, he said finally. The system needed stress testing. I accelerated the timeline. You endangered thousands of people, Amelia said quietly, in winter. Graves straightened, dignity returning like armor. I protected this company from incompetence, from decay, from accountability? Amelia cut in. She turned to security. Escort Mr. Graves from the building. His access is revoked, effective immediately. Graves laughed again, louder this time. You think this ends here? No, Amelia said. I think it ends honestly. Security moved. Graves resisted only briefly, then allowed himself to be led away, his composure cracking just enough to reveal panic beneath. The door closed behind him. The room did not relax. Instead, it sagged, like a structure relieved of pressure but unsure whether it could still stand. Darius stepped back toward the wall, already withdrawing. You don't have to disappear, Amelia said. He shook his head once. I didn't come here to be seen. A board member cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, we owe you an apology. Darius regarded him without bitterness. Apologies don't fix systems. Amelia felt that land. She turned to the board. He's right. This wasn't about one bad actor. It was about a structure that rewarded silence and punished attention. She looked at Darius again. You were cleared without defending yourself. That matters. It does, he agreed. But it's not enough. She nodded. She knew that now. As the meeting adjourned, the room emptied slowly, each person leaving with something heavier than they had brought in. Responsibility, perhaps, or fear of what unedited truth could still reveal. Darius picked up his toolbox. I should go, he said. Amelia walked with him to the elevator. When the doors opened, she hesitated. You stood there knowing they could still turn on you. He looked at her, eyes steady. Truth doesn't need allies, just access. The doors closed. Amelia remained alone in the hallway, listening to the building's renewed hum, healthier now, but exposed. Victory had come. It was quiet. Too quiet to feel like power. Because victory, she realized, did not sound like applause. It sounded like systems finally telling the truth, and waiting to see what you would do with it. Amelia Rowan did not bring a coat that night with a logo on it. She parked 3 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, hands in the pockets of a plain dark jacket, breath turning white in the air. The city looked different when you approached it without announcing yourself. Smaller, quieter, less impressed. The warehouse stood exactly as she remembered it. Boarded windows, bent fence, a place the city had agreed not to see. She paused at the gap in the wire, listening first. No voices, no music. Just the low, steady hum she recognized now, the sound of warmth being negotiated into existence. She stepped inside. The light was softer than before. One lamp was off, another flickered faintly. The room smelled of soup and old wood and something metallic underneath. Maintenance disguised as comfort. The children sat around a folding table, bowls in front of them, spoons clinking softly. They looked up at the sound of the door. Eyes widened. Not fear. Calculation. Amelia stopped where she was. I won't come closer, she said quietly. Darius Cole emerged from the far side of the room, wiping his hands on a towel. He froze when he saw her. This isn't a good idea, he said. Not cold, not angry, tired. I know, Amelia replied. That's why I came alone. His gaze flicked to the children, then back to her. This isn't a good idea. I'm not here with an idea, she said. I'm here with an apology. Silence settled, not hostile, but wary. Darius gestured toward a chair near the door. Sit, he said. But stay there. Amelia obeyed. I'm sorry, she said. No qualifiers, no explanations. For following you, for assuming, for standing on the other side of your invisibility and calling it safety. The children watched closely now, spoons paused mid-air. One of the older boys narrowed his eyes, not threatening, but protective. Darius folded his arms. Apologies are easy after the damage stops. Yes, Amelia said. That's why I'm not asking you to forgive me. That caught his attention. She continued, choosing each word carefully, not as a CEO, but as someone who had finally learned that promises were not speeches. I want to help, she said, but not with charity, not with press, not with my name on anything. Darius shook his head. We've heard that before. I know, she said, and you shouldn't trust me. One of the children spoke up then, voice small but steady. Are you the lady from the big building? Amelia looked at her, the same girl who had called him uncle. Yes, Amelia said. The girl considered that. Are you going to take this place away? The question cut cleanly through every corporate defense Amelia had ever learned. No, she said immediately. Then, more carefully, I won't, and I can't, without your permission. Darius studied her, weighing not sincerity, but cost. What do you want? He asked. Amelia met his gaze. To change the rules that make places like this necessary. He exhaled slowly. That's a big sentence. I know, she said. That's why I'm willing to put it in writing. She reached into her pocket and placed a folded document on the floor between them, far enough that no one felt cornered. Darius did not touch it. What is it? He asked. A commitment, Amelia said. Independent oversight, housing without conditional employment, education access without performance quotas.